Good, everyone. I'm here, minus my shawl. I left it somewhere, so I'm just got my donka on. That's my Zen. This is my donka, and my skirt is my shemdup. That's 3 Tibetan words I know. Okay. So, okay, people. What's the plan for today, please, Lars? What are we supposed to talk about?
We are supposed to be talking about the 8 verses of mind training by Langri Thangpa. And
Really?
this is the first of 2 sessions, the next being in 14 days, Thursday, 7 o'clock. And we are using the one by Lama Geshe, which he wrote, that translation that has been sent out to everybody.
Lama Geshe, what text is that?
That's the one, like...
Show it to me on the screen.
Tara, do you have it?
No, show it to me on the screen.
Yeah. Tara might have it on this, ready for the screen. Here we are.
Let me see it. This is not by Lama Geshe, but it's by Lama Zopa.
Oh, Lama Soba. Sorry. Yes, Lama Soba. Sorry.
Lojong Langri Thangpa Doji Sangye, determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
That's got to be the one.
Okay, so maybe you can please send me the text, and I will on the share in the chat, and I'll open it myself, and I can, because I'd rather see people. And you can have the text.
Will you see it done, Tara? Thank you. Sent to Venerable
Robina in the chat, is it?
Yeah. And we will start by just offering.
Just a minute, I want to get the text. I want to get the text first. Where's the text?
Tara will be sending the text.
I know, so I want to get it first, then we can start.
Oh, yeah.
It's uploading. It should be just a second. There, it just popped up.
Thank you so much. Can you just can you move the prayers away for a second, please? Thank you. Can you move your desk? That's right, exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Right. Let me just download it and I'll have it ready. How do I get it to download? I can't, it's got to ask me to download it. Okay, wait, click to open, but I want to download it. Click to open, okay. Trying to put acrobatic full screen mode, no. So let me just download it. But I want to, okay, I'll do it on my screen. Save as my computer name. This is all ridiculous. I want my desktop, that's it, yeah, here we go, save. Okay, good. Thank you so much, I have it now. Where is it? Desktop. Where's my desktop? Where's the text? That's it. I see it now. Okay, good. This is great.
Right. And we will start by offering a short mandala, and then we can do the refuge prayer, and then start with the text, the 4 verses. Maybe 4 to take.
So go on then. Tell people what you're doing.
We are offering all the wonderful contents of the universe and offering to all the Buddhas and the Dharma.
No, you're offering to the Buddha as a request for the teaching.
Yes, that's right. Correct.
Specific point. You're asking to the Guru Buddha, supposed to be offering to the teacher, the Buddha, as a request for the teaching. That's the plan.
Yes.
Okay, go.
Sashi perki juching meto trahamri rablingji nihide kyan padi sange shindu mehte ulwagi ruku namda shingla chepaksho jetsun lama dampa kienam kiche kikala Kien se trin tri, jicha sampe dun se shin mala, sabge chuki chapa, baptu so, idam guru ratna mandala kamya tayami.
Okay, so we start our session with this, our reminding ourselves. Put the prayers back on. We'll put the prayers back on. That's okay. Reminding ourselves about reminding ourselves of our reliance on the Buddha, the first 2 lines. And the second 2 lines we're saying, so the first 2 lines, I'll say it in English first, we're saying, and the first 2 lines we're saying, until we are enlightened, we are going to rely upon the second line, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And in the second two lines, we're stating our motivation, our purpose, our goal for being together. We're saying, by the virtuous karmic seeds that we plant in our mind from listening to these teachings, may the result of that be my Buddhahood, because then I can benefit sentient beings. That's what we're saying. That's the first point. First time, we do 2 more times in Tibetan. Sangye chodan soke chonam la, janchu badu dagni kyapsu chi, dagi chonyen gi personam ki, drola penche sangye drupa shog. Sangye chodan soke chonam la, janchu badu dagni kyapsu chi, dagi chonyen gi personam ki, drola penche sangye drupa shog. Thank you very much. Okay, people. Get rid of my chat. How do I do that? Close. Okay. Okay, so we have to give framework as always. We have to see always have to see the context. You see, this is what's interesting. This is why this lam rim is so incredibly helpful. In the beginning here, oh, lam rim, Lama Zopa says, practice lam rim. We go, yeah, lam rim, boring. But somehow what it is a map. It's a map, basically. And the pieces of the map are the points, the places you pass through on your path. So the map, the end result of this map, the goal is to reach your Buddhahood. So obviously, if you're following a map, it's not such a good example. If you're following a map to get somewhere, the map has to lead you there. It has to be the end result. So here's our Buddhahood. So the points you pass through are your practices, are the ways you think. It's internal. It's an internal map, okay? So this map is laid out like any logical map with pieces, first place you get to, then you get to the next place, then you get to the next place. It's logical. A map by definition is that. But we're not used to thinking of a spiritual path like that. It's a path, a map on a path. We use these words very casually, but I think in our minds it's kind of puzzling when we read it all and we don't understand how this can be a map. What do you mean abide by the laws of karma? How come that's a part of a map? How come that's a destination, How come that's a passing point? This is the point. It's an internal map. So the steps you take on this map, logically, should be in order. Therefore, it's one step at a time. Sort of so logical, but it takes a while because our minds are so chaotic. It takes a while to hear the simplicity of this, So if it's an internal map, then what it's referring to is literally ways of thinking. Ways of thinking. You're not using your legs, not using your eyes to look at signposts. It's the mind and it's the mental consciousness. We are training to think certain thoughts in order. That's the point, So as we know, if we pluck out, we know very well this path is laid out, the lam rim is laid out in terms of the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. That's why I like to use it very casual language and call it junior school. Well, what's the thinking there? Well, that's to the essence of it, the essence of junior school, the essence of all the practices in there, where you learn about karma, the laws of karma. The whole path is one way of framing the whole path is in terms of quitting suffering and gaining happiness. That's one way of framing the path. The end result, Buddhahood, is where you've quit all the suffering and its causes, and you've gained all the goodness and its causes. So the very first way to think, to prepare you to move into this path, is to stop thinking, forget about the mind yet, it's to do with the speech and the body. So the essence of junior school is stop harming sentient beings based on the logic of this natural law that runs the universe, the law of cause and effect, such that everything you think and do and therefore say sows seeds in your mind that produces your future suffering and happiness. And remember, the goal, one way of framing the whole path, is in terms of lessening your suffering and gaining your happiness. You've got to hear that. The steps that are laid out are the ways to think that will bring that result. So junior school, the first one, is controlling your body and speech. Why? Because then you stop sowing seeds that will produce your future suffering. Therefore, you will only produce future happiness. And that's already a pretty good start. Then you get to the middle scope, or I like to call it high school. Now you start to actually work on your mind, when you really become a Buddhist now. And you get to the root of the problem, which is the delusions in the mind, because they are the main cause of your suffering. The main cause of why your body and speech do things to harm others. So this first and second scope is the way to achieve your happiness and your freedom from suffering, the initial one. And you could quit there. You could graduate at high school, but you can go further. So if you go further, you get onto the compassion wing, and this is where we are now with these 8 verses. So obviously, if the compassion wing is university, we all know logically, in order to qualify for university thinking, you've got to have high school thinking and junior school thinking. It's kind of logical. This map's internal, remember? So and this is why it's so crucial. So when we hear these verses, which are in the more advanced levels of the compassion wing, the more advanced levels of university thinking, when we hear them in isolation, we can't understand them if we haven't got junior school and high school under our belt. It's like you go straight into a university level math class. If you haven't done junior school and high school, you'll just be listening to gobbledygook. We know that. So here we have to teach about the 8 verses. In its own right, it is a Mahayana teaching, but it implies deep knowledge and practice of the first and second scopes. This is vital. Logical if it comes to any other body of knowledge. So what is it we have to prepare our minds for in order to even hear the advice of these 8 verses? Well, as Pavanka Rinpoche says, you need to be the student of these needs to be a suitable vessel. And what that means is a person who's done junior school and high school. It's obvious. The degree that this makes any sense at all is the degree to which you've begun to control your body, your speech, and your mind. Why? Because you know what? Because you're vomiting at the thought of more suffering. You have to have really powerful renunciation. You're sick of suffering. You're sick of the shit of your own mind, your own misery, your depression, your anger, your jealousy. You're sick of being harmed by others, people abusing you and hurting you and lying to you and stealing from you and bad-mouthing. You're sick of it. You're fed up with all this suffering. But you realize that you are the cause of it. This is the responsibility that you take. This is when we become really grown up. We know that we prepared this shitty garden. We created the cause for this bad stuff to happen, as well, of course, as the good stuff. That's the knowledge that has to be absolutely in your mind. And then practice as a result of that makes you very strong and grown up and adult, and you take responsibility. So renunciation of all that is pretty powerful. But then that's what makes you a suitable vessel. Because now in the compassion wing, we're looking at how to help other people stop their suffering. But you will not be able to do that until you know how to stop your own suffering. That's the absolute necessity of entering into the first and second scopes of the practice, which is the renunciation of your suffering and the causes of your suffering, which are in your mind. So it's a pretty intense level of responsibility that we have to have under our belt. You need to be a suitable vessel. Because now in these practices, you've got this brave attitude. You're trying to cultivate this brave attitude of greeting with a really happy mind all the disgusting things that happen to us. And that's where you've got to be a suitable vessel. If you're living in a relationship now and you're miserable, you're a victim, you blame everybody else, it's not fair, poor me, didn't ask to get born, people harm me, people kill me, people don't give me a job, it's not my fault, I didn't ask to get born. This is how victims talk. This is how we are. This is samsara. If we're still like that, and we hear the advice in this second verse that says that when you're with others, you see yourself as the lowest of all. Quite literally, we would not be able to get that advice. It would seem completely insane. You'd say to this Langri Thangpa bloke who wrote it, excuse me, mate, I already do that. What do you want to do? Rub my nose even more in my misery? We would not be qualified to hear it. This is not joking. I say it in a blunt way, but this is literally the point. So don't even pretend to have this level of practice if you can't even understand your own suffering and why you've got it. Not possible. It's just not possible. And that's where people will misunderstand the teachings and then become victims and think I'm supposed to be abused, you know. It's complete misunderstanding, complete misunderstanding. These verses, these practices were kept secret because they were so shocking, so opposite to the world, you know. And this level of practices, these 8, this is the essence, the absolute central essence of the Mahayana path. By being able to qualify to be a suitable vessel to practice these practices, this is the quickest way to smash ego and ego grasping and self-cherishing and attachment. We've got to be ready for it. In other words, we've got to know how to hear it. We've got to know how to think these thoughts. So we can listen. We do our best, try and hear it. So each verse is quite shocking. So the thing is with these verses, they're not like emptiness, where you've got to squeeze your brain and we get all excited about hearing about emptiness. No, these are simple verses. The verses are almost deceptively simple, almost embarrassingly simple. But the meaning behind them is more outrageous than emptiness, I tell you. I'd rather talk about emptiness any day. It's easier than these verses. So the very first verse says, in order to get the most benefit from sentient beings who are more precious to me than a wish-fulfilling jewel. I mean, we can spend the rest of the hour and a half on those lines. Don't show the text. It's okay. If I need it, Tara, I'll tell you. I've got the text there. So the lines say again, in order, hear the word, each word means something. In order to get the benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious to me than a wish-fulfilling jewel. So what on earth is this man talking about? Well, this is what it is. First of all, this is already outrageous. So you've got to understand the framework for the very first line because it's so peculiar. In order to get the benefit from suffering sentient beings. What does that mean? Well, that's the way they talk very specifically. You know, for example, when you do the 4 opponent powers and you do the second step, which is called reliance, and there are 2 parts there. The first part, the first one, regret. You think of your negativity, you think of the things you've done to hurt others, and you regret them because you're sick of suffering. You regret them out of compassion for yourself. Now, the second one, reliance, has 2 parts in the practice. The first is you rely upon, obviously, the doctor, the Buddha. Well, whom can I turn to? And you delight that you've got a doctor, in this case, the Buddha Vajrasattva, who's got methods that I can practice to purify me. The second point is this. The second one you rely upon, this is where the context for reliance, for this idea of getting the benefit from all sentient beings. The whole logic here is when you say you rely upon sentient beings, is because, you know, here we are trying to cultivate bodhicitta, cultivate compassion, okay? We're trying to cultivate it. So it's logical, in order to get compassion, what is it that you need in front of you? Rely upon, need. Guess what? Suffering sentient beings. That's the point about the Buddha. When he was brought up and his father was really worried because these great holy seers had predicted that he'd become a great spiritual teacher. So his father desperately tried to hide him, to keep him away from suffering, because he could see his boy's compassionate heart. And he wanted to try and prevent him from seeing suffering. So, you know, if the Buddha the prince, had never seen suffering people, and his father tried to make him see happy people and have all these happy girlfriends in the harem and happy this and happy that and flowers everywhere, and he hid the old people, he hid the sick people, he hid the dying people. But for some reason, when the Buddha went out for a walk one day, because he got bored, or in his carriage, and he saw sick people, he saw dying people, he saw old people, and he was profoundly shocked. What have they been hiding from me? If life gets you to this, what's the point? And then he generated this incredible compassion. So this is the point. If you never meet a suffering person, if you never meet an old person, if you never meet a dying person, of course you're not going to have compassion. You're just going to have happy feelings. So this is why they say, in order to get the benefit from all suffering sentient beings, as Geshe says, The bodhisattvas, they need, best of all, they rely most of all, they need their enemies. That's the best object of compassion. So it's in that sense they talk about getting the benefit from all these sentient beings. That's the way they talk. It's not naturally the way we would say it. So we've got to spell it out. Because often people think it really means get the benefit for sentient beings. Well, of course, but that's not the point here. The aim is to get this compassion, and you therefore so you're going to make the most of these suffering sentient beings to generate in your heart this incredible brave compassion of the bodhisattva. So the third line says, the first two lines, in order to get the benefit from suffering sentient beings, the second line, who are more precious to me than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Again, this is a bizarre idea. What does it mean? Or forget wish-fulfilling jewel. There used to be such a thing in a human birth eons ago, before this, before we had bodies looking like a bunch of apes, a long time before this planet, when the human birth was more subtle, more radiant, more blissful, more light. There was such a thing, they said, as a wish-fulfilling jewel. They talk about it in all the texts. So forget that. It's too abstract for us. Let's use a simple concept of €1 million, which is quite a small amount these days. You have to be at €1 billion to think you're rich. But let's just say, if you put the words here, now it gets more shocking, now it gets more real. Who are more precious, all sentient beings, this is the words, all sentient beings, all, who are more precious, it doesn't say it to me, but it means to me, than €1 million. So then analyze this. This is where it's so shocking. First of all sentient beings are more precious to me. What the hell is he talking about? This is where these verses are already showing that Langri Thangpa is already a yogi with incredible bodhicitta, because this is not the way ordinary people talk. Maybe your baby is precious to you. Maybe your bloody poodle is more precious to you. Maybe your grandma, when she behaves nicely, is more precious to you. Maybe your boyfriend, when he behaves nicely, is more precious. A half a dozen people, if we're lucky, isn't it? Might be more precious than €1 million, although we really struggle to doubt that. So think if you had a choice. And this is all sentient beings. So you've got a sick person in front of you you've never met before, and you've got a choice to help the sick person, to get compassion, or you've got a choice to take €1 million. This is what it means, literally, put it right down to earth. This is pretty heavy duty. Excuse me, that's heavy duty. So just showing the level of actual compassion Langri Thangpa must have to even have thoughts like that. It's pretty shocking. So that's why you've got to analyze it, not just be romantic. Oh, all sentient beings are more precious to me than a wish-fulfilling jewel, blah, blah, blah. No, analyze it. It's shocking. When I hear Lama Zopa talk about bodhicitta, when I hear all these amazing people talk about bodhicitta, I shake in my shoes, Emptiness is safer, I promise. Bodhicitta is beyond insane. So take these verses so seriously. Long way to go, baby. So what will you do for all these sentient beings who are more precious to you than €1 million? I will care for them. And there's more to it. I'm care for them at all times. This is all sentient beings, people. We're happy to care for the poodle as long as the poodle doesn't keep shitting everywhere. As we're happy even to care for a baby as long as it goes to sleep when we change its diapers, its nappies, isn't it? Our compassion is very limited. We're prepared to have compassion for somebody, but if they keep vomiting all over us every day, we're going to give them up. If the dog keeps shitting and being ridiculous, we'll go kill it. Even our mother, if she behaves badly enough, we're going to put it on old people's home. We've got very limited compassion. We have very limited levels of compassion. Because why? Because we have attachment and self-cherishing. So we've got to recognize this and see the levels that these verses are trying to show us that we can accomplish. It's outrageous. So aim for that, aim for that, aim for that. That's the plan. Just by saying these words, totally incredible, Oh, what happened? Go away. Something went wrong on my screen. Just a minute. This is ridiculous. Right. Okay, a second. We're going to open it up again. No verse. No, do not open it. Okay. So now I'll just get the exact words. Hang on a second. All right, I've got the verses here. It's the exact determined. It says determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. I'll hold them most dear at all times. That's the piece of advice. That's the essence of this advice. That's the essence of the advice in the first verse. I will hold them as most dear at all times. That's kind of a very broad statement, isn't it? But now it starts getting specific, people. That's your first one, which is already intense. And doesn't say the ones I adore, the ones who behave nicely, my poodle, my boyfriend. No, all, including the wackos and the Mr. Trumps and the crazy politicians and the psychopaths and the pedophiles. Okay, people? So long way to go. And this is the point. This is the point here. This is the point here. This is not possible to even begin to contemplate this level until we have renunciation, which is another word for what we would call self-compassion. So we have to have such compassion for ourselves. So many people in the West say, oh, I've got compassion for other people, but not for myself. That means you haven't got a clue about what compassion means. You've got sentimental compassion for a few doggy woggies and pussycats and children. That's about it. Very limited, okay? This is way more profound. So you can't begin to go here until you've done the renunciation steps and see your own mind, your own delusions. Then not have guilt and not hate yourself, which we love to do. We wallow in self-pity. We wallow in self-criticism. We wallow in guilt. That's not Dharma. That's just more delusions. You know, to have to realize we are suffering and that we are in delusions and karma are the cause. And therefore the result of that is this compassion to yourself. That's how we would say it. That causes you to think I must give this up because you know what, Robina, honey, I'm sick of suffering. I'm fed up with suffering. I'm sick of suffering. The more you see your own delusions, the more you see your own suffering, the more you'll have compassion for others. This is prerequisite. That's the first verse. I will hold them most dear at all times. We do our best, okay? I mean, you can't do it straight away, but you aim for it. So how would you practice this? Look at each verse and the essence of the practice. This is the action point. The last line is the action point. So how would you apply this in daily life? Well, the time to apply it is when somebody does something wrong to you, just vaguely. A person you hear, a person you think about, a person in the class that's in the class with you right now, they annoy you, they irritate you, you get upset with them. That's called mild aversion. So what will you do? You'll catch yourself and you'll go, Robina, I just said I'm going to do my best to hold sentient beings as dear at all times. So then you change your thought from the criticism, from the arrogance, from the hubris, you know, from the criticism of the person, from your annoyance to realizing I'll do my best to try and hold this person dear. Hold this person dear because they're suffering just like me. That's the action point. Verse 1. 2. This is the one that's so shocking. I always joke and say, if you were a therapist and you recommended this practice to your client, they could happily sue you for abuse. I'm not joking. So the second one says, when you're in the company of others, when you're with others, you know, some of us might not be, but we are often in Zoom is called in the company of others. And these are the words that are very difficult for us to hear. We'd say them in a different way, I think, in our culture. So look at them. I'll always consider myself as the lowest of all. So if we've got the victim view, which is where we're all at, the samsaric view, the self-pity view, the victim view, which hates myself, thinks I'm a creep and loves to hate myself and thinks it's a virtue to hate myself. I'm so bad. I'm the worst person. I've got so much negative karma. I'm going to go to the hell realms. I'm so bad. And we love to think that and we refuse to hear any other way. That's not Dharma. That's just self-pity. And that's just also ego. Thinking you're really bad and hanging on to it. It's just like thinking you're really good and hanging on to it. They're the same delusion. One over-exaggerates your beautiful qualities and the other one exaggerates your ugly qualities. So it's not virtue at all. It's delusion. It's not virtue. And that's how we think about ourselves. I'm a creep. I'm no good. I'm nothing. And I'm the worst person. I've created the worst negative karma. I know people like that. They insist they're the worst person on the planet. They insist there's no one more negative than they are. They insist they're going to go to the hell realms for 42 eons because they are so negative. And you argue with them and they don't agree. They prefer to think their own thought. They prefer to think they're creeps. That's not Dharma, people. That's not Dharma. That's self-centeredness. So so what's the virtuous way? What's the intended way that Langri Thangpa has here? Well, when you hear the third line, it makes it even more shocking, but gives it a framework. The third line says, and from the third and fourth, and from the depths of my heart, I'll hold others. It says dear again, but as supreme. Or you can say superior. or better than me. Because the first one says, consider myself the lowest of all, and I'll see others as supreme. This is really, even virtuous people, even people who've got very good ethics and don't have self-hate and understand the Dharma, still have problem with these lines. And of course, this is 10th century, so, you know, maybe we'd say it differently. So again, what's the action point here? The action point in all these verses is looking into the difference. Each verse points out a certain situation in life and taking that situation as a marvelous opportunity to smash attachment, to smash self-cherishing, and to smash the root delusion, ego grasping. So let's look at that. So in general, in the lower scope and the middle scope, the main enemy, this is on the wisdom wing, the main enemy is attachment, this primordial delusion, the main voice of ego grasping, the root delusion. And this attachment is this dissatisfaction, this hankering after something more, never satisfied, exaggerating the delicious qualities of something, over, you know, and then hankering after it, manipulating to get it, and possessing it when you get it, and all the rest, blah, 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 attachment. That's just the grossest level. And it's a bottomless pit of dissatisfaction that can't be satisfied because it's a misconception. That's attachment. Now, because we have attachment, we then cherish me most, naturally, as a consequence. So self-cherishing isn't an exact equivalent of attachment. Self-cherishing, or as we would simply say in our culture, selfishness. So we don't mind admitting to attachment. We kind of, oh yeah, we have a badge. Oh, I've got the worst attachment possible. Oh, I'm so attached. But nobody likes to admit to being selfish. You know, it's very embarrassing. I'm not selfish. What do you mean selfish? Because that somehow touches a nerve. Well, that's the Tibetans call that self-cherishing. We call it selfishness. Or in some languages, it's called ego, like in the French, I think, is egoist or something. Means putting I first. So logically, because we have the root delusion, which implies, which infers, which states there is a separate I, and then attachment to get what that separate I wants, naturally you put the I first. Of course you do. So self-cherishing is the main enemy on the compassion wing, because what you're trying to do is shift that, turn it around, and cherish others. So the aim of all these verses is to take the opportunity of the difficult times in life to smash that specific delusion, to turn it around, to smash the one where I comes first. And this is where it's painful to hear, because in our culture, psychologically, and it just pervades our culture, this seems like mental illness. There's no way we can comprehend this psychologically as some sound practice. So when we misunderstand this, it's really revolting. We don't get the real meaning of it, you know, which is why you have to be a suitable vessel to even hear these words properly. So then when we analyze it, have a look, we're all like this. You could be a Dharma practitioner. You know, you're very devoted. You've got your lamas, you're devoted, you practice day and night. You don't care much about samsara. You're practicing, you do your practices, you do your water bowls, you're trying to give up attachment. But we all have this incredible, some people more than others, this incredible kind of arrogance that likes to point out other people's faults. That's the very nature of having this sense of a separate self, which comes from the root delusion that even posits a separate self in the first place. As Lama Yeshe says in Mahamudra, as soon as you posit I, that implies others. So even if we can be really good practitioners, we're so arrogant. We see others, and even if we're a shitty person ourselves, we also at the same time we hate ourselves and put ourselves down and think I'm going to go to the hell realms for 42 eons and I'm so bad and I'm so deluded. But at the very same time, in our Zoom classes, in our other classes, on the street, in the shop, we're arrogantly pointing out faults in others, which assumes that you think you're better than them. So one side we loathe ourselves and have self-loathing. At the same time, we've got the sense of superiority. Look at these people. Look at that person. Look at that idiot there. Look at that silly person. Look at that negative person. Look at that politician. Look at that pedophile. We spend all our time criticizing other people. We all can see this. We all do this. It's just the way ego grasping and attachment are. So this is trying to smash that very specific one. So a simple way to apply this, you're in a Zoom class, you see someone who annoys you, they ask dumb questions, they say silly things, you don't like their nose, you don't like their hair. You gossip to your friends on the Zoom class behind the class because no one can see your face. You talk to each other and make arrogant statements about each other. Human beings, it's all right, we're all the same. So your practice is, instead of doing that, shut your mouth, look at that person you're criticizing right there in the face, look at them on the Zoom thing, where you feel safe, and then find about them one thing, just one, that's better than you at that. So maybe you're criticizing their hair. Well, you decide their nose is prettier than yours. Their ears are a nicer shape. They've got a nicer sounding voice. They seem more intelligent. Perhaps they know mathematics more than I do. You compare them to you specifically, and you just take one point, not in general all the time, myself as the lowest of all and others as dear and supreme. That's too advanced. Do it one person at a time. Be very specific. If any person, even in your mind, you don't like, the person down the road, the person in the shop, your grandmother. So there's constant hubris of finding mistakes, other people. You find just one thing about them that's actually better than you. That's applying, that's the action point here. Bring it down to earth. Not all, if you can eventually, yeah, but do it real, one thing. She's got enough. I always joke about my karate, when I did karate and kung fu. And I was always very attached to my feet. I always figured my feet were good kung fu. I always talk about this. My feet were very good kung fu feet. They're old and can't now, but they're still very good. I've got very short toes and they're kind of equal size. And I can get a really good kick. I could get a really good kicking foot, So I was being arrogant. So in Kung Fu, everyone has naked feet, don't they? I'm confessing now. This is 40 years ago, so I'm just far enough away to confess to it. So I'd always be looking at people's feet. I really mean it seriously. I'm not joking, because I was proud of my feet. So I'd compare my feet to other feet. So there was Paulette, this nice girl who was a higher belt than me, and she was very good. She was very good, but she had awful feet. I didn't like her feet. I criticized her feet. They was long and skinny. Excuse me if yours are long and skinny. Okay, so I'd be this arrogance about my feet being better than Paulette's, and I'd catch myself because I was a nun at the time. It was 40 years ago. So then I'd find something else about her. So she had a much better approach when we did fighting, we did sparring. She was much more easygoing and relaxed. So I'd praise that about Paulette. And she was definitely better than me at that. That's the practice. It's quite specific. Don't just say the words and get all emotional. Be specific. That's the action point. We can't do all. It's too much already. From the depths of my heart, but to struggle from the outer levels of your hard heart. Have one little thought, she is better at that than me. That means I'm not as good as her. That's what the lowest and the highest means. Doesn't mean I am a low person. She is a high person. That's much too absolute. Be specific about qualities. It's a really incredibly brilliant practice, I tell you. Especially people you don't like, that you've got a very vivid picture of as ugly and mean and nasty, your grandma, your ex-husband, you're rude, you're a rude, abusive ex-boyfriend. He is rude and he is abusive, but still, that's anger painting a picture that's bigger than what he is. All the delusions always paint a particular picture. You use one brush and you paint the whole person with that. We know that's what people do to us, and so painful. So this is being very specific, looking into the person and taking one quality. Attachment exaggerates all the lovely qualities of the person. Anger takes all the ugly qualities and exaggerates them. Here we're being very specific, that's the action point in this verse. So are there any questions? I've already talked for 40 minutes and we're up to verse 2.
As always, please raise your hand or write question in the chat.
Nobody? Okay, no problem. All right. But of course, all of this, yes, who is there?
Ariella.
Hello,
Ariella.
Ariella. Talk to me, sweetheart.
Good
Yes.
evening, Venerable. Thank
Hello,
you.
darling.
In regards to what you were saying before, by starting to being, first of all, compassion to ourselves before others. One or two tips. How do we start? How can we be a little less judgmental about our actions, about our mistakes?
Okay, we're trying to be specific here, aren't we? So be specific, let's be specific, let's narrow it down. So be specific, let's, without being too confessional, think of one fault of yourselves that you criticize. Think of what's one simple thing you criticize about yourself. Just say it. We've all got them, so just say it, Ariella. Don't be too personal.
No,
Say
I'm trying to think about something that I would love to work out with you at the moment. Let's say I get angry very quickly at other people's
Okay, good.
mistakes.
Okay, good example. Thank you. Everyone has this. So the very first level of practice, the way to think, as we've been discussing in this very first level, which I'm calling junior school, you express that anger with your mouth. Yes, okay, good. So your first, this is the point, honey child. This is the point I'm getting at, Ariella. If we don't have an understanding of these different stages of practice, that's why you're asking the question, because you're confused about the different levels of practice. So the very first level, sweetheart, in relation to the first level, which is about the law of karma, the very first level of practice is you notice that you say angry words. So how to change that for your own sake, you have to realize that every time you speak angry thoughts, you're sowing a negative seed in your mind that will ripen in the future as you're suffering. So now you don't want future suffering, do you? Would you agree with that? So therefore, the practice at the first level is, well, you know what, Ariella, you've got to start controlling your mouth. That's the first level, sweetheart, but there's got to be logic to it because you are compassionate to yourself because you know that everything you think and do and say produces the person you become. Now, that takes a time to even consider because we don't believe that in our culture. That's the first junior school entry level grade 1. So you attempt to quit, to attempt to zip your lip, not out of guilt, not even yet out of compassion for others, but out of compassion for yourself, because you practicing bad-mouthing other people harms you. That's the answer to the junior school level. Does that make sense, Ariella?
Yes, body, speech, and mind. Yes.
No, I didn't say that at all. You're making more to it than I said. You exaggerated what I just said. I'm being specific. The first level is junior school, which is only body and speech. I didn't mention mind yet.
Okay, mind. Okay.
Can you hear that though?
Yes.
But you hear the point. So I'm not going to be mean to you, Ariella, but say it back to me. What do you think I said as an answer to your question? The first part of my answer. So what's the very first piece of advice for yourself, for your benefit?
First of all, to zip my mouth.
And why would
because of my own karma.
No, but what does that mean? Why is that? Why would
I'm planting planting negative seeds, even for my future.
So you have to have, it's a bit of an abstract concept, but that's what we have to have confidence in. But not even that. You know what, Ariella? I think we even got to see, forget about future karma. Have a listen to this. Have a listen to this. We don't have to worry about future lives. You can see, can't you, if every time you follow your angry speech, that disturbs you even right then, doesn't it? Would you agree with that? So that's already compassion for yourself, to see the pain it brings you right now. Forget the future. That's already demands a lot of awareness of ourselves and a lot of humility. So it's not out of guilt, it's out of kindness to ourselves. That's the very first level. Now, the next one is getting control over your speech. Now, high school is you start to know your mind, and now you start to control the anger itself. And that's pretty intense. And again, it's for the compassion for yourself. I'm trying to give a teaching here, people. Do you mind? I'm really sorry. You want me to move, perhaps? Might be better, mightn't it? Sorry, I'm just got different activities here. Shall I move into another room, you guys? You got to do stuff, right? Are you leaving? Oh, okay, that's fine. Okay. Thank you, darling. You don't have to leave. I can go to another room. You got to go anyway. All right. Okay. Grab your key, darling. Where is it? Oh, where is it? I'm on the counter. I don't know. God. Maybe in my pocket. Hang on a second, people. I've got to deal with business. Nothing I got to it myself. Now I lost the key. I have to find it. Oh, okay, good. Thank you, Don. Thank you. I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much. Okay, people. So are we communicating here? Ariella, this is homing in on really specific details. This is why you have to become familiar. If you want to become familiar with the steps of the path, it takes time. It's very specific. And it takes a long while for us to realize that controlling my body and speech and mind is for my benefit, because mostly we just do it out of guilt because we don't want to be criticized, and it just ends up causing guilt and misery. Do you get my point? So it takes a while to develop this so-called, as we call it in the West, compassion for ourselves. Do you understand, darling?
Much better. Thank you, Venerable. Thank you.
All right, sweetheart. Go on, people. What else?
There's a question in the chat from Beth asking, what if the only thing you can think of that the other person is better at than
I can't understand. What? Start again.
What if the only thing you can think of that the other person is better at than you is something you don't care about and it's really trivial?
Of course.
So the only thing is trivial. So why would you bother even say?
I don't understand. What's trivial? What are you talking about? What's trivial? What's she saying? Start again, please. I don't understand her question. What is it?
What if the only thing you can think of that the other person is better at than you is something that you don't care?
Good, Beth. Start with trivial. Be humble. Start with her toes are better than yours. Her voice is nicer than yours. She's got a prettier left breast than you. She's got a nicer ear than you. Yeah, trivial is a good way to start, Beth. One step at a time, baby. We're talking trivial. We're talking small here, not grand gestures. Someone else. Someone else? Nothing more. So let's go to verse 3. Okay. This one, again, sounds so simple, but is the basis of all of this practice. It's the basis of all of the practice. And again, it's like, really advanced to do this properly. What's implied here shows how advanced. So vigilant, one is being vigilant, watching one's mind like a hawk. There's the mind now. Vigilant, I'm adding thoughts here, watching your mind like a hawk. The line says, the moment a delusion appears in my mind, let's say Ariella's example of anger, but the trouble is, isn't it, like Ariella's saying, we don't even notice the mind because suddenly the words are blurted out the mouth. That's why the first level of practice is controlling your body and speech. That's why controlling your mind is way more advanced. Don't kid, don't doubt it. Not controlling your mind is way more advanced. Controlling your body and speech is like a miracle. If the world controlled their body and speech, no one would ever harm anybody. But it just shows in our culture, we have no awareness of our body and speech because we have no awareness of our mind. We're always in the middle of killing somebody. Oh, I'm angry. What'll I do? A wee bit late, okay? So this is underneath everything. Vigilant, the moment a delusion appears in my mind, a delusion, meaning anger, attachment, jealousy, resentment, low self-esteem, self-hate, guilt, all the other rubbish, which we swim in with respect to us. And we've got 1,000 thoughts a second. Endangering me and others. This is an outrageous point, So when you got your speech down, Ariella, and you begin to really practice, and you notice the anger arising in your mind, and you think, oh my God, this is endangering me and others, I will confront and avert it without delay. This sounds so simple, it's a joke. But look at our minds. I mean, this is not being rude about us. It just shows how advanced these simple practices are. Vigilant, the moment anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, low self-esteem, arrogance, guilt appears in my mind, endangering me and others, I'll confront and avert it without delay. That's advanced. That's the yogis who've already probably got single point of concentration. That's the highly advanced yogis who've been practicing for years, that you can catch your mind before it gets anywhere near your body and speech, which demands a daily practice of incredible awareness, incredible self-awareness. That's why you cannot do this until you have a proper practice in the morning, at least to start the ball rolling. You do all your purification practices, which remove all the delusions at a deeper level. And then you have this daily practice of focusing, so that then you bring to bear that what you get from your daily practice into your daily life, and then you watch your mind like a hawk before it gets to the speech, and you grab it and you nip it in the bud. That's the ideal practice, but that's really advanced. You can see, but we can try. Now, these four, 5, and 6, seems to me the scenarios here, the first one's bad enough, the second one's even worse, and the third is even worse. And this, in a sense, it seems to me, it's like levels of closeness to oneself in one's daily life. So you listen to this one. Again, this is 10th century Tibet. Whenever I see beings who are wicked in nature, wicked in nature, so what the word we'd use is psychopath. That's the term we use, isn't it, in the West? Wicked in nature. We don't speak cute words like that. Wicked. Oh, he's wicked in nature. Means his tendencies to be negative are so strong. That's what we mean by a pedophile. I mean, sorry, all these Greek words, psychopath, a seriously mentally ill, troubled, suffering person. Or maybe you could say, we even say more politely, a narcissist, a person who's totally self-centered. But this is the people who do harm to others. Narcissists sometimes just spend all their time on themselves. But this is a person, so the second part says overwhelmed by violent, negative actions, but listen to this, and suffering. So our tendency, we're happy to point out wicked people who are overwhelmed by violent, negative actions. We love pointing them out. The warmongers, the terrorists, the politicians, the pedophiles, the rapists. We love pointing out those. But then you say, who are also suffering, that stops us in our tracks. Because we do not like to think that pedophiles and terrorists and warmongers and psychopaths are suffering. Because as soon as we say they're suffering, we think you're supposed to feel sorry for them, and they get off the hook. So this is really confusing to us. That's why we have to know the first scope and the second scope teachings first. Without this, this is just a useless verse, you know. And we haven't even got to the action point yet. So what do you do? So let's just analyze before we get to the action point. There are wicked people who are showing they've got heavy delusions and they do terrible things to harm others. This is back in 10th century Tibet. Can you imagine now if you woke up in the 21st century America or Switzerland, you'd have a heart attack at the intensity of the negativity, isn't it? So what is this person? Whenever I see, hear about, read about on my iPad, my news, my phone, my television, every day, 24 hours a day, flooding our mind with people like this, who are overwhelmed by violent, negative actions, means they do terrible things to harm others, but also that they're suffering. That's the part that blows our mind. So what does that mean? This is why we can't get this. So you go back to the junior school and high school, which is the Four Noble Truths, basically, and the Buddha says there is suffering. You're looking at yourself. And then you see the causes of it, and you realize that your past karma and your delusions that cause your suffering. So that on the basis of that, you start to have this compassion for yourself, or you have renunciation. Therefore, I must give it up. I'm sick of suffering. So it's only when you know that the only time you harm others is when you're upset, hurt, angry, suffering, depressed, jealous, low self-esteem, guilty. You do not harm others. You do not cause suffering when you're feeling loving and compassionate and kind and generous and forgiving, do you? So the only time we harm others is when we are overwhelmed by delusions, which is when we are suffering. That's why if we have guilt, when you have guilt, you don't think you're suffering. You just want to point out your own faults. You're obsessed with yourself and you want to point out your own faults because you think that's virtue. It's not virtue. Oh, I'm the most negative person. I've got all this negative karma. I'm going to go to the hell realms. We love to think that, like as if we are the worst person. That's just called arrogance. That's not virtue at all. You'd have a kindness to yourself if you realize the suffering you're causing yourself. You'd have a softness. You'd have a tenderness towards yourself. You'd have compassion for yourself. That's what brings renunciation. So, you know, again, the only time that you ever do anything to harm anybody is when you're miserable, when you're suffering, when you're arrogant, when you're jealous, when you're depressed, when you've got low self-esteem, when you're angry. That, because that's when you are suffering. So we only cause suffering when we are suffering. Now, all you do is turn to the other person, this pedophile, this terrorist, this psychopath, overwhelmed by violent negative actions and overwhelmed, therefore, by their own suffering. If we don't understand this understanding of suffering, we don't understand Buddha's teachings. Okay? So what's the action point for this person? I'll hold such, it says rare ones. Well, according to our newspapers and our television shows and our iPad stories, that it's just not so rare anymore, isn't it? I will hold them dear as if I had found a precious treasure. So why? Why would a psychopath be a precious treasure for you? Because the impulsive ego, you see, our ego, like everybody else's, only wants nice people, nice things, nice sounds, nice smells, people loving us, people giving us things. It's only then we feel relaxed and we like people. But the moment somebody's, you know, this is not even harm to us now. This is not even harm to us. This is harm way out there in the outside world. This is not even harm to us yet. This is harming other people way out there. So when you understand karma, when you understand they're driven by their own past habits, when you understand that's because they've done them before, when you understand they're causing themselves unbelievable suffering, when you understand that they are suffering at this second by the torment of their own anger, their own paranoia, their own demented behavior, this second they are suffering, then you'll begin to understand how they're causing themselves suffering. Then you'll begin to understand how you should hold them as most dear. And this is this most precious treasure that you're going to grab hold of that can help you see your mind and understand your suffering and want to smash that and begin to have compassion for them. That's the action point. Which doesn't mean you won't put them in jail. Which doesn't mean you won't call the police on them. Which doesn't mean you won't kick them out of your house. Yeah, see, but the compassion we have now is really sentimental compassion. You know, this is wisdom. You're using these wackos in the world as a basis for your incredible compassion. Fifth one, this gets closer to home now. This is getting closer to home. This is getting closer to home. This is like at work. Everybody has this example. When out of envy, or jealousy, envy, jealousy, anger, others mistreat me with abuse, insults, and the like. Everybody has that. Your grandma, your auntie, the next door neighbor, your ex-boyfriend, the people at work, your colleagues, the boss. Because why? Because we've all got attachment, aversion, and ignorance. We've all got enemies, friends, and strangers. It's just the way it is. This is getting closer to home. It's more intense. This is now directed at you. What's the action point? I'll accept the defeat and offer the victory to them. This is unbelievably outrageous. This is the most shocking piece of advice. This is really hard to hear. And of course, all of these practices, you've got to be a suitable vessel and you've got to know if you're capable. So if you're sitting in a relationship with your sister or your husband or your mother, and you're a victim still, you know, you haven't really practiced. And you're a victim and you're overwhelmed by this and you're full of rage and guilt and shame and you can't leave the relationship and you're just terrified and scared. This is not your practice, sweetie pie. Your practice is get the hell out of there as quick as possible. This is an advanced practice. This is an advanced practice for a person who understands karma, who knows their own mind, and who's got a very courageous attitude. This is advanced practice. This is why these were kept secret. This is not a joke. This is like outrageous stuff. This is like crazy stuff, you know. But we can try a little bit every day. Hear the words precisely and offer the victory. It says to others, but it means to them, those very people. Even when your sister says, you broke my cup. Oh, I'm so sorry, darling. Just take the defeat, you know. That's already outrageous. We find that even if we did do something wrong, it's very hard, still hard to take responsibility. You forget about if we didn't do something wrong. It's like crazy. It's like we think that is really like a martyr. And again, if you're in the martyr mode and the victim mode, and you sit there and you allow your boyfriend to bully you and punch you every day, thinking that this is what you're doing here, rubbish. You got to get out of there. This is not your practice. This is not your practice. That's number 5. Now, the next one is even closer to home, okay? Even this is right directly in your face. This is your beloved husband, your beloved child, when someone whom I benefited and whom I had great hopes. Sounds like a child to me, have great hopes, you know. Gives me terrible harm. What's the action point? I'll see them as my holy guru. This is the most powerful, the closest to home, at the heart of it. This is intense, you know, isn't it? I mean, we can hear it, but without the framework of the bigger picture, without the understanding of renunciation and karma and the mind and our own suffering, this is not a possibility. This is just not a possibility. But if you understand, at least understand it, you can say these words with the wish to practice when you're ready, you know. But to hear the logic, you've got to understand the logic of these words. Otherwise, they can be misused, you know, totally misunderstood. It's very shocking. So, any questions? Any questions?
Andrea.
Yes, Andrea. There's Miriam as well. I'll be second, Miriam. So where's Andrea?
Thank you.
Okay, sweetheart, talk to me.
Thank you. Okay, so my question is about this last one. You said that maybe we can think of if my child will cause some harm to me. It's quite difficult for me I have children, and it's quite difficult to me that he's causing harm to me, although sometimes he's very angry at me, but I'm immediately thinking, oh no, he's angry at his mother. He's not doing good for himself, something like that.
I understand. No, that's good. That's good that you would have that. That's really fantastic. And if you can do that, then you don't have much work to do. Then that's really fine. You know, of course. But I mean, let's say your son rejects you or sues you or gives you up and never talks to you again. That's also the way you should learn to think. So it's good practice. In other words, it is, again, the action point, and you're already learning it, is that it's a practice for you. It's harming him, but you've got to see how. I mean, okay, you're not feeling much harm at the moment because he's a boy and he's angry. But when you think of this, it says the words, who has done me terrible harm. It means like someone has abused you or given you up, or do you understand? Extreme act. It says terrible harm. I mean, having your boy just shout at you is not so terrible yet. Yeah. You understand? Yeah. Okay. So you can see every day these examples. I mean, when parents come to me in tears about how their child has believed they're the cause of all their suffering, never talk to them again. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, it just breaks my heart to hear that. That's when it's a serious thing, you know. But I mean, but you're doing well. If you can think that way, it's great. And he is harming himself. But when it's, you're right, exactly. That's real compassion. You're seeing he's harming himself. Exactly. It's perfect. But this is, you know, who's done me terrible harm, but in whom I've had great hopes, you know, especially that sounds like a child to me, doesn't it? You've spent your life, sacrificed your life for that person, or even your partner. You spent your life looking after them, supporting them, putting their needs first, and they go and, you know, give you up for a younger version, that kind of thing. Do you understand? Very painful.
Thank you.
Thanks, darling. Yes, Miriam. Yeah.
Hi, Venerable.
Hello, darling.
Nice to see you again. Can you elaborate more on point 5, please? I'm having a bit of a problem seeing the benefit of accepting blame if I haven't done something, because then that would be untrue, and I don't just now miss the point where the benefit is accepting the blame and being like letting it go.
Yeah, exactly, darling. The point behind this level of practice, it's very specific, is to help Miriam smash her need to put I first, which is how all of us are. This idea of cherishing me. These are specific practices to help Miriam smash the instinct to put herself first. That's it. That's very specific. It's a particular kind of tennis shot. It's a very hard shot. It's very specific. It's a practice for you to take on board the horrible things that happen as a specific antidote to you putting Miriam first. But at the same time, you could be a mother and you would not do that when your child abuses you. You might in your heart take it, but then you'd still be firm with the child. So it depends on the relationship. You do other things as well. But this is specifically practices to help oneself smash the primordial instinct to put self first. That's it. Do you see my point?
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. What else, people? Something else? No. Time is at 2 o'clock. Any other questions about these? Because this is the essence of it. These last two are slightly different shift, you know. Yes, Alona, sweetheart.
Hi, Venerable. Thank you
Yeah.
for your teachings. When I read those verses, for me, it comes, I'm more about purifying my karma and see.
Sorry,
so that
start again. I missed the word before karma. What did you say?
purifying. Yeah, when I think the first, what comes to mind is purifying my karma. It doesn't come that, selfishness. I just think about, especially like in the fifth verses, that if somebody's read me wrongly, then I've done the harm to them. That's why they're in front of me right now. So
That's right.
I have a chance to purify.
Yes, exactly. You do. But it's a good point, Alona. So listen, this is the point. This is an interesting point. Thank you. It's a really good point. So when you know, see that practice, so what level of the path is that practice?
It's in it's the junior school.
That's right, precisely. So that practice, the junior school practice, is implicit already. It's not the explicit practice. That's implicit already. You would have that, and that would already be in your mind. But the explicit practice is the one I just said. So that would be it's a given that you're purifying your karma, but that's not the point of the practice. It's quite specific. Do you hear my point?
Yeah, I hear.
So of course you practice that, but that's not, but then you've got to practice the actual point on top of that. And that's why if you are a suitable vessel, if you're not a suitable vessel and you don't know about karma, that's why it's very hard to practice it. But because you know about karma, you can practice that view of happily taking the blame. But without understanding junior school, which will be implicit in your mind, you wouldn't be able to practice it. This is the point. So that's the point. Each of these verses is specific. Do you understand my point, John?
Yeah.
You hear the point?
Yeah, I hear. When I practice, it feels also.
So when you practice what? Be specific.
Taking the blame.
Okay, good. Your hubby gets annoyed at you, but you didn't do anything wrong, for example. Let's say.
I take the pleasure in watching me doing this. It feels good of practicing, of letting go. It's also bring that good feeling of me.
Well, that's me practicing. I'm very happy for you. So keep practicing. When your husband punches you in the nose, and when he accuses you of stealing his money and sues you, then you'll be ready for that.
I don't know if I'm that advanced.
Of murdering a policeman and be sent to prison for 27 years. No, you start with the small ones. That's the point, baby. You start with the baby things. Don't wait. I mean, that's why I always talk about my friend Sonny, who got landed with 17 years in prison, accused wrongly of killing 2 policemen. Don't wait till that. Start with the small things. That's the point. You understand?
Yes, I'm working on the small things.
Good on you, girl. That's the one.
Thank you.
Like Beth. She's going to find something small about people, like their pretty little toe on their left foot. That's a good start. Small is good. One step at a time. Go on, people. What else? See, the thing is to really understand these verses, when you read these, they just sound like generally kind of, oh, wow, it's a bit difficult, that practice. But we sort of do it very broad sort of brush, but they're specific practices to be an antidote to a very specific delusion. And this is why the more we work on our mind, the more we can see these delusions and identify each one, because they're different, And that's, of course, we learn all about that in high school when we learn about the mind. Each of the delusions have got its own flavor. Yes, Andrea.
Yeah, sorry, again, me. Just how can I help others, for example, my son, to be more humble.
You want to help others, not yourself, others.
I would like to help my son or to show him
Okay,
to
okay,
be
good,
more
good,
humble.
good. Okay, so this boy, how old is he? 42 or 14?
16.
Okay, so he's still under your care, right?
Mm.
He's still under your care.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, that's important to know the relationship. Okay. And he's arrogant, is what you're saying.
Yes, sometimes. So he thinks he's, I don't know, yeah.
Of course, that's typical. We've all got. So is he arrogant, particularly in relation to you or to everybody?
To the whole world.
The whole world. Yeah, fair enough. I understand that. So then, you know, it's like, does he have a good relationship with you?
Yeah, quite good, yeah.
Trusts your wisdom. So this is where, okay, so this is the point, isn't it? I mean, I was talking to one of my sisters recently, and her nephew, who's like 7, is the same. He's a super clever little boy that knows answers to every question in the universe, you know, and he really thinks he's the ant's pants. So even him, when he's 7, it's hard to get him to be humble. So you've got to have a wise mind. You've got to see it and not get emotional. And you've got to sort of like treat it like a discussion, for example, and point out another way. Well, what do you think about if you see it this way? What do you think about that? Or you make it like a reasonable discussion, not like a lecture. Bring him into the discussion and get him to see, well, you know what, I see this. What do you think? And you force him to be reasonable. You don't just say, don't think that. That's first the key point. Even this 7-year-old, you can't just tell him what to do because he's so clever, you know. You have a discussion. And you even say from my own point of view, well, I know what you mean by that. But sometimes, you know, I can be a bit arrogant and I can see that fault in that person. And then when I see that blinds me from seeing the other qualities, and then I see particularly, I probably see that in myself. Or, you know, okay, this is another one too. I always say this for myself. That if I see a fault in someone else, it might be true. But one approach to it is to why would I want to point it out? Because there's something in me that is kind of resonating. Like, in other words, that okay, sorry, keep it simple. One of my own practices when I see other people and find fault in them is I say to myself, and you can say this as a discussion, well, you know what? I say to myself, well, thank you for showing me how not to be. You see the arrogant. That could be, you know, your boy might be right in saying something else. The person lies or steals or whatever. Well, that could, so you say, well, I bet I've got something in me like that. That's one approach. Because we've all got all of the problems, I think. We've all got all of the problems. So I either say to myself, thank you for showing me how not to be, as I take it as a practice myself, or I'll say, you know, I recognize that. So but that's hard to see, because he wouldn't think he has any mistakes, you know. Or you just simply have a discussion about how we tend to be very arbitrary in how we see people. You know, we only see certain things. There must be, or even you're probably right, say to him, but there must be other qualities there. What good things do you see in this person? Just make it like a discussion to open their mind up to see other things. There's different approaches. But especially if it's a 16-year-old person, you don't just tell them what to do. You have a discussion. And they can either listen or they can't, you know, what to do.
Thank you.
Well done. I'm happy you've got a 16-year-old boy and not me. Not to mention a 7-year-old. Okay, people. What else, darlings? 15:15. We have 15 minutes left. We have a discussion. We've done the verses, but let's just do the whole lot. Then we'll go over it again next week and we do other things. So 6 is 7.
Ariella.
Huh?
Ariella.
Good, darling. Talk to me.
Me again.
Good, darling.
I don't really have a question. Can you talk a little bit more about number 6, especially the last, I shall regard that person as my holy guru?
Yeah, again, did you get the general idea?
Of course.
The general idea behind these verses is they're very precise ways to use the opportunity to smash our own sense of putting me first when bad things happen. So all it means is when it says to see the person as my holy guru, it means by the person rejecting me, they're showing me they're showing me my mind, aren't they? They're showing me my anger. They're showing me my hurt. They're showing me my selfishness by leaving me. They're not doing what I want. So in that sense, we treat them as, in our mind, as if they're my teacher pointing out my mistakes. That's all. Can you hear that or not? No, you don't have to hear it. So just say to me what you feel. So would you agree that if a person, where are you, Ariel? Your picture's disappeared. Would you agree, let's say, there you are. Let's just say let's say, if you got, how old are your kids?
My daughter is almost 17.
17, okay, let's pretend your daughter rejects you, leaves you, and stops talking to you, which is not uncommon for mothers, isn't it? It's very painful. So how, okay, this is why you've got to have some sense of the whole path. How could how could she be a teacher for your mind? So guru means a teacher, and the teacher's showing you something about your mind. So what would you see that you could try to use to help you interpret the situation to be practice for you? Is there any way at all? If it's not, then just say it. It's okay, because it's not easy.
I didn't understand the point of your question. I'm sorry. I think I was listening too hard.
I understand, darling. The general idea of these verses is to help you take bad times and use them to smash your delusions. Can you hear that concept? Can you hear that?
Yes.
So every time someone's, even if your kid doesn't do what you want, it shows you that you're angry. Would you agree with that? It shows you your anger. So you go quietly to your own mind. Well, thank you, darling. You still tell your daughter what to do, but in your heart, you're thinking, well, that's very kind of her. She just showed me I'm still angry. So you realize, great, I'm happy I've seen my anger. You get that concept?
Yes. And I
Well, here, can you imagine if your daughter rejects you, and your jealousy and your pain and your loss and your rejection and your anger and your hurt would be incredible, wouldn't they?
Yes.
Well, then if you're brave enough and you're trying to practice this path, this is a powerful opportunity for you to see your painful delusions, to see your hurt and your pain, and by using this as an opportunity to purify your negative karma. In that sense, she's your teacher. Do you understand?
Yes.
It's your own private practice. Your daughter's not doing anything. Your daughter isn't being your teacher. She's not sitting there giving you lectures, but this experience is showing you to do with your karma and your own mind. So it's a precious opportunity for you to learn something about your own mind and your own karma. In that sense, this person is your precious teacher. Do you understand now a little bit?
Yes, I definitely see more my delusions and my attachments when I have a disagreement with her, or when she doesn't do what I tell her as I am the mother.
Exactly. So in your private practice on your cushion, you're sitting there saying to yourself, well, you know what, you still tell your daughter off. You don't tell her this. This is your private teaching, that this is a really good opportunity for you, Ariella. This is helping you see your own crazy mind and, your own anger. So you really thank your daughter for showing you this in your secrecy of your own mind. In that sense, she's your teacher. But you speak to her like her mother and you tell her off. That's it. This is a private part of your practice. Do you understand? You don't go and thank your daughter for being mad at you. No, you don't do that. That's not good for her. You understand my point?
Definitely.
Okay, darling.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you. Thank you.
Good. So I think the next one, 7, really, I think, is where the practice of Tonglen comes in. I think this is the evolution. I think this is a source of what became and is still a very popular practice, a meditation practice. So I think we'll leave that to next week. And then 8 is really about, I'll read the 2 verses. 7 says, in short, both directly and indirectly, I offer every happiness and benefit to all my mothers, and I'll secretly take upon myself all their harmful actions and suffering. That's the essence of Tonglen. Will you, as a meditation, we'll discuss it next week, will you visualize yourself breathing in all the suffering and pain of this person, happily taking it upon yourself, happily them being free of it, and that's called compassion. And then when you breathe out blissful white light, and you give them all your happiness, all your goodness, all your merit, and that's called love, wanting them to be happy. So we'll discuss that next week. And then 8, undefiled by the stains of the superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns, which is this kind of more subtle way of talking about attachment, which we'll do next week. May I, by perceiving all phenomena as illusory, this is all about emptiness, be released from the bondage of attachment. So we'll discuss this next week as well. All right, darling people. I think that'll do us. So we think we dedicate all these seeds we planted. May all of these seeds ripen exactly as we motivated. And then may we continue to make the wish that Lama Zopa Rinpoche come back quickly in a form that we can recognize, so we can pray, we can continue to practice. And His Holiness told all the people in the FPMT meeting in Dharamsala, he told them that he had a dream in which Palden Lama told him he's going to live for another 20 to 30 years. He often says 10 to 15, but Palden Lama told him directly he's going to live for 20 to 30 years. So we can hang around His Holiness until he's 118. All right. So maybe, so when Lama Zopa Rinpoche comes, he's going to take care, he promised he'll take care, he promised he'd recognize. And at the earlier meeting, a month before, His Holiness told them that he sees him up to about here. So we can have great confidence that Lama Zopa is coming soon at some point, and His Holiness will take care of him. And it's also His Holiness, the FPMT wrote recently, the board of directors of FPMT wrote, because all the time there's been this discussion, who will take on the job from Lama Zopa of guiding this organization from the spiritual point of view. And Rinpoche always kept saying, I don't think any one person, but the best thing he said was, you can ask His Holiness for advice. And His Holiness has promised he would give advice. That's all. So I'm very happy about that. So we've been delighted with that, and we keep close to these holy beings. We want to become like them. That's why they're in our lives, to show us the example. And may bodhicitta never stop, and may bodhicitta grow in the hearts of all, and may all these seeds be planted, ripen in the future, and may the Lama Zopa Rinpoche come back quickly, and may we live a long, long life. Jangtrup Sentro Rinpoche, Ma Ke Pa Nam Ke Guchi, Ke Pa Nyam Pa Me Pa Yang, Gong Ne, Gong Du Pa Ba Shog. May we never develop, even for a moment, wrong views towards the deeds of our most precious teachers, our most precious spiritual mentors. And with faith and respect gained from seeing their goodness, may their full inspiration flow into our hearts. Okay, people. Thank you, precious ones. So kind.
Thank you, dear Venerable. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, darling. See you in a couple of weeks. Yeah,
Robina.
couple of weeks, last. Is it a couple of weeks?
2 weeks from now. 2
Okay.
weeks.
Assuming we're still alive, we'll see each other then.
Yes,
Bye.
thank you.